Hello and welcome to our webinar on the future of college. I'm Jennifer Scott, Chief Academic Officer of Nexford University, and I'm joined here today by Kathleen deLaski. Kathleen is an education and workforce designer. She founded the Education Design Lab in 2013 to help colleges begin the journey to reimagine higher education toward the future of work. Her nonprofit helped 1,200 colleges, organizations, and economic regions design shorter, more affordable pathways for learners to achieve their economic goals, and she still serves as the board chair today. She also spends time as a senior advisor for the Project on Workforce at Harvard University and teaches human-centered design and higher ed reform as an adjunct professor at George Mason University. We're excited to say her new book, Who Needs College Anymore, is releasing on February the 25th. So Kathleen, welcome to our webinar today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an exciting time and a stressful and challenging time for higher ed. So it's an interesting time to be having this conversation, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're very much interested in looking forward to sort of hearing some of the insights from your book and thoughts on kind of higher education and higher education reform. For those of us who are joining on the webinar, just as a bit of housekeeping, I do want to share that my colleague, Jermaine Peggies, is also on the webinar. We encourage you to put questions or comments in the chat, and Jermaine can surface those as we kind of go through this conversation today. But Kathleen, so to kick us off, like maybe just to set the landscape a little bit, how would you describe the current state of higher education in the United States today? And what do you think learners are looking for now in their new college model?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I should say that I am very pro degree. I have a degree. Many people in my family do. Some people don't. I don't. When people see the title of the book, "Who Needs College Anymore?" A few people have said, "Well, wait. Are you telling us that college is dead as a model?" What I wrote the book to try to do was to elevate this idea that a minority of people have four-year college degrees, and yet that's the focus in the press. That's the focus around a lot of the tuition models that we have, and the majority, particularly what I call and the organization, the Education Design Lab, call new majority learners, which is actually a majority of Americans do not have a four-year degree, and yet we don't talk about what are the opportunities for them, what are the models that work to afford them pathways to economic sustainability, economic success. We don't really have models that are affordable for folks who decide they're not going to get a degree, and they're not really scaled. So that's sort of why I wrote the book, was to really highlight the other pathways that should be accessible to learners, because they're asking for it. I mean, that's what you can see from the enrollment trends, is that the fastest growing area is short-term models of higher education, not degree models. And so we need to have a conversation. We need to really push ourselves to think about not only how can government and how can the private sector, entrepreneurs, support new majority learners in other pathways, but how can colleges adapt to serve those folks as well? They're doing some of it, but they're not doing enough, and they're frankly constrained by policy and regulation.
Yeah. And what we find is that students want both the sort of credential or the certificate or the official recognition, as well as making sure that they get the skills, right, that employers need and want, whether or not it's on the full degree or on some of these shorter pathways that they might pursue. And as you look at who are the players out there who are sort of making strides in this direction, what does it take to be a leader in this transformation, to be able to bring these new kinds of opportunities and these new pathways to these new majority learners?
Yeah, so I look at it from a standpoint of human-centered design, because that's how the lab has furthered its work around, you start with the end user, which is, the student, and you look at the barriers to them succeeding, what hasn't worked in the past, what are they asking for, what are their motivations, and also employers, in a lot of, colleges, they're starting to get this, but a lot of, institutions don't think of the employer as an end user. And yes, they're not as important as the learner. I would agree with that. But they're a close second, because increasingly what learners are coming to an institution to get is a good job. That's the surveys have shown that shift over the past 30 years. It used to be a more well-rounded education. Now what they care about first and foremost is getting that first job. And I do a thought exercise in the book that suggests that universities and colleges and community colleges do a thought exercise of thinking about, well, what if that was a value proposition that you put, if not front and center, at least right near the top of the list of things you do for students, and the things you deliver to either the degree holder or someone who's getting a certificate. And what you see when you start to unpack what's happening is colleges are starting to innovate. So, one of the things that it takes to be a leader, I think, is to elevate the student needs of relevance, because that's something that we're hearing, right? And also what we call visibility, right? So value and quality have always been on the table in terms of, things that a college university would say that they're offering. I would say that flexibility or convenience are two needs that have been increasingly met. The colleges are doing a better job in the digital age, right? And I do think that COVID also really pushed the market to support different modalities of learning, right? But this idea of relevance and visibility I think they're going to be the trend lines of the coming decade of how do you support students in that way. In addition to the ones we've already, value is still important, and value and relevance, right, go together, right? Because what's the ROI? Why am I paying this money? Am I going to get a good job? So I think those are the leaders, to answer your question, that will be successful in, competing for, what is frankly in the U.S. market a dwindling number of students, will be those who get that that's what learners are asking for in particular, and employers as well.
Yeah. Like you, I've been in the higher ed space for, most of my career, and from my work with other colleges and universities, it really does seem to be about the leadership on campus that's able to bring that spirit of academic innovation, and let's move more quickly to bring these new kinds of pathways and degrees to market. I think as I reflect on this, I think what helps us at Nexford is that we have a shared mission for bringing these programs to students that are infused with that practical skills-based know-how. And our key market are those adult learners who are coming back with a particular career purpose and goal in mind. And they want to ensure that they're entering kind of a pathway that will then deliver those results. So I think it's interesting as we think about the adult learner market, as we think about this transformation and the digital transformation of these higher ed offerings. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit more deeply about that profile. Like, why is now like a tipping point? These are some of the themes that we've been thinking about for a while. Are there things that are bringing this to a head that you think will accelerate this transformation into these new pathways?
Yeah, well, I think there's a combination or a convergence of trend lines that are, causing, I think, colleges to be more in the spirit of innovation and adaptation. It began really around 2012, 2013, which is actually when I started the lab. I started the lab because there was it was such an interesting time then that people were starting to talk about how do we democratize, higher education by unbundling some of the pieces. This was the early days of MOOCs, and edX and the Coursera and some of these education entrepreneurial organizations that were thinking about, well, why can't we all take a Stanford class in AI, right? And that sort of got a lot of people thinking inside and outside of universities. There was a ton of venture capital that came to the space really for the first time. And I had been in other industries that had been disrupted in very negative ways, and including journalism. I really wanted to start an organization to help colleges. If anyone was going to do disruption, they should do it themselves, right? Because they had the best interests of students at heart, and that was sort of the spirit in which the lab started, 10 years ago. And I would say that the trend lines since then have been really interesting around basically moving in the direction of unbundling to some extent, but also a strong realization coming from employers at the same time that those kind of skills that your liberal arts degree gets you actually are just as important as your coding skills or your cybersecurity certifications. That there used to be a line back in 2013-14 that the boot camp will get you your first job, but your philosophy degree will get you your fifth job, right? And you don't hear that much anymore, those kind of arguments, because I think people are just confused about which skills do matter. The World Economic Forum will tell you that it's the top 10 skills are all really lean towards what we might call soft skills or durable skills.
Yeah.
But they have to. You have to have them, and this is what I tell students, and this is what I try to teach. You have to have the soft skills with the technical skills. Mm-hmm. And the problem is we defend traditional universities by saying, well, the soft skills, the critical thinking and the context, the historical context that you're going to learn in your, in your general education courses are essential, and we can't give that up. Yeah. Yes, I would agree with that. And I think the problem is, unless you're going to a very affordable community college, we have to figure out how to make the whole package more affordable, or break it up in ways that people could, buy these services in smaller chunks to be able to save money when they need to. Because that's the trend line that you see people trying to do, and what they're learners, and what they're giving up is the critical thinking and they're giving up the survey courses and civilization, or the English composition class. That's what they're giving up when they're moving to certificates, right? Because the certificates mostly just give you the technical skills. So we have to figure out how to unbundle all the parts of college that we want to save.
Yeah. I'll want to circle back a little bit later to this idea of affordability, because I think it gets so important for new learners today. But I also want to pick up on this idea of those, whether we call them durable skills or power skills. I was a history undergraduate, right? And even started a doctoral program in early modern history way back when. So I believe firmly that the gen ed courses can help teach some of these very powerful skills of communication, collaboration, analysis, kind of critical thinking. But I think it's exciting to think about opportunities to make all of those more practical and more aligned kind of with workforce needs.
Could I just say that's where the visibility comes in, right? Which we are not doing a good job of yet, and we have to get better. Is the visibility of those skills that you just mentioned when somebody finishes college and they don't have anything specific on their resume about how they learned to be a critical thinker or a collaborator or an empath. How do those get pulled up and highlighted so that they actually make it into the algorithms that get you either put in the interview pile or the no thank you pile as a job applicant, right?
Right. Yeah. And to your point, it starts with the intentional design of sort of how you make sure that you're integrating them thoughtfully within courses and as a cross-cutting competencies, right, across courses in a certificate or a program. And so picking up on this idea of how one can communicate these skills and competencies sort of out, as we all know, the college degree has been an incredibly important signal, market signal for, years or decades. But how can we build up, how can we help make sure that these skills are surfaced in kind of the resumes and transcripts for particular learners? And how can we build up credibility in these additional market signals? For example, if you take a certificate, or if you're pursuing an apprenticeship or some of these other alternative models, how does our credential system have to change to keep pace with, one, how learners want to showcase their skills and competencies, but two, also what employers are looking for so they can figure out which applicant or candidate goes in what bucket, if you will?
I think my big picture answer to that, and let's put apprenticeships aside because I think that's a different set of why that's not getting, why apprenticeships are not scaling.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about how do we bring more market value to what is becoming an unbundled world in higher education, I think the answer is to itemize. We have to itemize the skills so that we can create the by industry maps, so that there's the visibility that a learner, an employer, and the learning institution that might be, trying to, match them, can all see that, when you're an entry-level cloud computing engineer, you need these skills. When you're a cloud engineer too, you need this set of skills, and on up the ladder. It has to all be visible so that learners can get a certificate, and it means the same thing for employer A or employer B. Colleges can't create them, and I'm sympathetic with colleges. They are trying to create a lot of certificates, and if the employers are not informing those and sending the signals to schools and learners, it doesn't work. It has to come in the other direction. And schools understand this. I think learners understand this, but employers need to step up to create these maps. And where it has happened, it's working pretty well. At least in hiring environments where hiring is happening, right? Like if you look at tech, when tech is hot, or when cybersecurity, which is currently a very good hiring market right now, these certificates and certifications in particular, so industry certifications, work very well as a hiring signal. What doesn't work as well is if a school or an organization creates a certificate and it has a generic name or the name of the school, and employers don't know what that means. And I would say that we probably only have certifications, industry certifications, for 25 to 30% of job roles in the U.S. And most of these are connected to licenses, fields that are, where you have to have a license to be in the field. And those are driving the certifications. But we need to extend, we need to certificationize, to create a new word, the skills genome, or the skills map in America.
Yeah. Where would we get started on that project? I mean, it makes a lot of sense in terms of improving sort of transparency and being able to create, kind of this feedback loop, right, between skills employers need and particular kinds of job roles and professions. Like, who would we have to bring to the table to get that project started?
Well, I describe in the book one area that's doing it quite well, and it's usually driven by desperation, right, of unfilled jobs.
Yeah.
The cybersecurity industry created a set of basically competency maps by job role. And this was done with support of the federal government, because the federal government had needs. So they were trying to do hiring, and so that was a catalyst to bring industry players together. Because what cybersecurity employers would tell you, 5 or 8 years ago, was that we're just stealing, we're just poaching each other's people because there aren't enough to go around. And so they were willing to come together and start to name, okay, what are the pathways we want people to progress along so that we can bring more talent pipeline into this industry. So I think cybersecurity is a good example. I tell another one in the book similarly about behavioral health, where there's, a huge shortage of like clinical therapists, and the state of Colorado did a really good job of trying to actually create new jobs at the beginning of the pipeline that didn't require, a master's degree when you were only going to make, 50,000 or 40,000. And so that's another way where the employers came together, and the colleges actually helped convene them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The cyber kind of nice framework is one of the most robust taxonomies I've ever seen, and from a curriculum design standpoint, it makes it kind of really transparent and easy to figure out how you ladder up, so you can be intentional kind of for your learners. But on this idea of kind of skills-based taxonomy, one of the most evocative ideas or images in your book is this idea of a GPS for skills. I'm wondering if you can bring this to life a little bit for those of us, for those on the webinar, what that looks like for the learner, what that might look like from the employer's perspective.
Right, absolutely. Well, I try to imagine a day in the not too distant future, and AI actually, one person described it as the racetrack to help us get here, where you could, if you think about I use Google Maps, and it works for if you think about it as an analogy, this idea that you could put in a career destination, and it would tell you how to get there. It would tell you stops along the way. It would tell you what learning paths you might need, and it would basically work both ways. In other words, you could go laterally, you could go up and down, you could look at, here's what I have, what do I need to get to the next piece? And then ideally employers, you as the consumer, and this is where it maybe differs from the GPS model, would be able to opt in. So then it becomes a sort of AI inspired, a talent broker for you, that you could make your skills, what you have so far, visible to employers, and they could send you a note to say we'd be willing to interview you. It's happening a little bit. There's a company called Smart Resume that I profile, that's out of Arkansas, and I show an example of how this is beginning to happen. Then you also need what makes it, the two things that bring it to life are, one, what's being called skills wallets, which are this idea that you can house your skills in your own, portfolio, kind of like you would have a app on your phone, and your skills would be able to be organized. They would AI would help self-organize them around different jobs that you might want to see how close you are, like how close are my skills to what this role requires. And it would increase both, visibility as well as confidence for people who say, I don't think I could apply for that job. So that's the skills wallet is being, I would say, still betaed in a couple of states. Alabama, North Dakota, I talk about, are starting to really do this, like at the high school and some at the collegiate level. And this is these will power a GPS system like this. But what we need on the other end are the data sets that we talked about in the last question. We need the skills genome, because AI only works if it has data sets to read, right? So I think that's really job one for employers, and is to help us or lead the rest of us to create a skills map by industry.
Yeah. One thing I think is so generative about this idea of the GPS is that, especially as we see, technology change is accelerating. So therefore, the sort of the technical and skills that you need for particular job roles are going to keep changing and need to be updated over time. Is that it's a wonderful metaphor for a lifelong of sort of shifting and changing careers, and sort of always coming back in to figure out what the next destination is on the GPS, and how do I get there, and then I might be in that job role. But then it's about the continuous improvement and continue.
Yeah, you're so right. The lab, the education design lab, is working with about 100 community colleges to develop, and has been doing this for several years, micro pathways, which are, short-term, like Lego blocks of training or learning pathways that can get you to the next job, and then you can train for that job. So it's basically sort of trying to map inside of different professions. And what's really interesting in the early data coming out of the lab is that if you look at who is signing up for these micro pathways at community colleges, it's really people in all age groups, to your point. I think I assumed it would be people like in their 20s mostly, but it's actually similarly, integrated it varies by each age group, all the way up to, people in their 50s and 60s are signing up in basically equal numbers for these micro pathways, which I think supports your point about lifelong learning and lifelong reskilling.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have a question from the chat, so I think Jermaine will.
This question's about, some of the responsibility of education institutions. So given the nature and the changing nature of what's happening, a lot of stuff happening in the industry, what can education institutions do to better prepare students for the fast-paced, unpredictable nature of the modern work environment?
Okay, I think I heard that. You're a little bit off.
I'm off camera.
But basically, sorry.
Question of what more can education institutions do to better prepare for some of these changes that you're talking about, the modern work environment?
I mean, I think what the analogy I use in the book is the stepladder approach to either a degree or a sub-degree program. This idea that you as the learner can come in and out of higher education. Yeah. It doesn't have to be in the same institution, but certainly institutions who are trying to hold on to their students would be smart to design it that way, where you come in and out in a flexible fashion, that you can pivot, right? Because a lot of the micro pathways, for instance, that the lab is doing, they're being re-upped every few years and rethought based on what the employers, because you have to bring your employers in as the co-designers, and that's hard because employer engagement is not for the faint-hearted. But you have to bring them in to help design. And I think if learners feel like they are that the courses or the certifications they're being asked to gain are up to date and up to the minute and based on labor market information in their regions, assuming it's a regional university or college, that's going to help. It's going to help with enrollment. It's going to help with engagement, and I think it will help with like marketing to have people coming back.
Yeah, it kind of circles back to this idea of like, how do you fix and disrupt at the same time, right? And are there successful strategies you've seen for organizations who can do both? I know within our organization, again, we're always trying to stay very much in touch kind of with what employers need and want, the skills that are needed today, and be able to design that into our programs and communicate it effectively to learners. But where do you see that sweet spot in between sort of fixing and disrupting?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, some of the fix strategy is a result of constraints, right? I mean, it might be constraint thinking where you have a situation, for instance, where federal financial aid only supports students who are in a degree program, at least half time. And so how do you support the other 60% of Americans who might come to your doorstep and be looking for a way to get to a higher paying job? So, in a way that's fixed if what you try to do, which a number of like the colleges that the lab is working with are trying to like bring the short-term programs onto the credit side of the house, meaning they're trying to help those qualify for federal financial aid. So to me, that's kind of a fix. It's like work with what you've got,
Yeah.
Right. And then I think a disrupt model, I mean, I know, for example, Northern Virginia Community College, I was just talking to folks at Year Up, Year Up is one of the programs that's a 20, 25-year-old national nonprofit that helps, low income students who have come out of high school or, anytime in their 20s pretty much, do short-term training, and then they get placed in internships, right? Well, so NOVA in Northern Virginia Community College is one of several colleges that are partnering with that group. They're like bringing them on campus and saying, well, why don't you do this for our students? Like, give this service, be our wraparound service provider. So we're not going to compete with you. We're gonna bring you in and have you do your thing on our campus. So that's an example of a disrupt strategy where the college is saying, well, we're going to be our own disruptor.
Yeah. Almost your comments make me want to circle back a little bit to this idea of affordability, right? And here at Nexford University, our goal is to have highly affordable tuition that is for which students would not need to pursue federal financial aid, paid on a monthly basis and somewhat of a competency-based approach, so students can complete more quickly if they're able and they have the time, and trying to really keep that lens on what is affordable for either the degrees, or the shorter pathways. And I know affordability is a very important theme in your work as well, and critical for many adult learners out there who are trying to determine how they can best position themselves with the skills that they need for tomorrow's world of work. And I think, what does affordability must rule, which is, I think, one of the phrases from your book. What does that mean to you? And how can institutions help deliver on that?
Yeah, I think it's finding that balance between value and quality and relevance. It's like finding that point at which you don't have to give any of those up. Value is really a function of what somebody believes, they're getting in terms of quality or relevance. And we've seen, the reputation of the college degree, decline over the last decade. And I really think it's been a result of the affordability or the price tag of college going in in one direction, and then so the reputation of the degree is going in the other direction, and that's that's a shame, because a lot of us who were in decision-making roles went to college at a time when, I went to Duke University, and I had student loans, but they were it was very easy to pay them off. I went for a graduate degree at Harvard, and I paid for it myself. I got some student loans, but this was in the 70s, and then in the 80s, it was a very different world. Back then, like 2/3 of your college basically states and the Fed together, the government investment in your education was about 2/3 of the price tag, and then tuition had to support the other third. Now that model has flipped, right? It's like 1/3, and 2/3 is being borne, by the students, and that's what has to change in order for colleges to, both survive and keep the students coming in a way that they're going to sign up for a whole degree. And so one of the affordability things that I know I've been very passionate about is, how do you take the parts of the degree that are most important to getting your foot on the career ladder,
right?
But do it for a fraction of the cost. And I know that's what you're trying to do at Nexford. And we actually did the same thing with we worked with Catholic University here in Washington, D.C., to create a $10,000 a year degree, because their tuition and room and board was something like, in the 80s before discounting, $80,000. So we worked with them to create a low-cost degree in Tucson, Arizona, working with the Archdiocese there and the local community college, Pima, and we've done it. And not we, but it's happening. Like students are going to Catholic University, an expensive private school in Tucson, Arizona, for a fraction of the cost because they're basically joined forces with the community college there. So that's an example that I'm passionate about around how to make a college degree affordable.
Right, yeah, and another kind of a pathway into kind of the 4-year degree, and sort of not to kind of turn this into a political conversation, but certainly looking ahead, I think having these affordable options might be even more important. With who knows what changes might be kind of coming ahead. But to just switch topics slightly, as we're talking about these career ladders, and both for those who are coming in, for their first job, and they're actually looking for that foothold, they're looking for that beachhead in a career that will sort of generate a living wage, if not better. And then we also have then those adult learners who might be looking for lateral reskilling into a new career or a new role, either because their current job is becoming sort of less relevant and sort of there's job demand in other areas. So this idea of career exploration and discovery, right? And how one can maybe de-risk career discovery for adult learners. How can we help support learners? We think about this a lot, right, at Nexford University, from thinking about how we might be able to support our learners throughout their journey with us, with this career discovery and exploration and acquiring work experience. I guess what ideas or inspiration do you have for us or for others on the call?
Yeah, I write about this a fair amount. I would name two things in this conversation. One is the exploding phenomenon of dual enrollment in high school. And the other would be apprenticeship. So just to take each of those in turn, and these are ideas that colleges could do something with, as opposed to there are lots of ways to think about career exploration. But with respect to what's an opportunity for colleges, dual enrollment has been as somebody was saying to me the other day, it's really been a series of random acts, right, that have increased a dual enrollment in high school to the point that in the U.S., 1 out of every 5 community college students is actually a high school student. At my local community college here, I just learned this the other day, half of the students at the Loudoun County campus of Northern Virginia Community College, half of them are high school students. That's like 6,000 students. And so, like, what are they doing? Well, some of them are getting a jump on the affordability of college because they can take these classes for free and knock out some classes, and that's great. But increasingly around the country, high school districts and colleges are thinking about how do we use dual enrollment classes for career exploration and potentially for helping students get certifications so that they could actually be employed directly after high school if they don't want to go to college, or as a means of increasing their earnings power to help them pay for college. And so I profile a young man in the book who gets his certifications in data security in high school and ends up being intercepted on his way to community college by AWS, Amazon Web Services, and is now a software engineer making 6 figures. And he did not he did not get a degree, and he never saw himself as college material, which is really interesting. So he was able to explore the career as a high schooler, and with this funding model, there's so many a lot of states are paying, or districts are paying for students to do dual enrollment classes while in high school. What a great way to do career exploration, particularly if we could link that up with apprenticeships. And so that's one one idea that I think high schools around the country are exploring as they're thinking more broadly about the importance of career and technical education, CTE as it's called in the U.S.
Right, yeah. Okay. So the students, the high school graduates who have a certain number then of dual enrollment credits, they can either, say, moved into one of those registered apprenticeship programs or accelerate their pathway into the 4-year degree, potentially even into internships. And that idea of being able to kind of earn and learn at the same time, I think is just is a powerful one. And I think, there was a sort of another question that came through of, are there other models that you'd like to see? I mean, creating these connections, the trifecta between you have learners, you have education providers, and then the employers. Are there other innovative ways of sort of making sure they're all connected to sort of make that circuit most cost efficient, right, but also relevant? And also valuable. Just wondering if there are other ideas or other models that you'd like to see.
Yeah, we haven't talked very much about apprenticeship. Only less than 1% of American adults have come to their career through a registered apprenticeship, and yet there's a lot of ink, particularly in the last five years or so, around why can't people do apprenticeships? If you were going to start from scratch, reinventing higher education, apprenticeship might be at the center of it. So why isn't it happening? It's not happening because it's not funded in the way it is in the countries that are that have modeled it, like Switzerland, Germany, even the UK. And we haven't figured out how to incent employers. I think that's the biggest disconnect. If we could figure that out, I believe that apprenticeship would gain popularity. Right now, it's not just confined to the trades which is where it really started. It also is heavily being considered in like financial services, even in consulting. I profile an insurance company. So it's fields that are either desperate for workers or like old line kind of fields that feel like they're worried about where's our next generation of workers coming from. New fields like green energy. I profiled an apprentice in green energy. So that I think there's a lot of excitement about apprenticeship right now, but we definitely need to do a better job of figuring out how to incent employers. And I think that's it's going to require a turnkey approach for them, and we're not there yet. But I think that's probably what I would suggest is the kind of number one way to do that. And the other is just to fund alternative pathways with federal financial aid, like even a year up that I described earlier, like apprenticeship and short-term certificates. There is legislation in front of Congress right now that could make create some changes for short-term certificate programs in terms of student funding, and we'll have to see whether those come through.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And my colleague Jermaine, I think, has another question. I'm going to let him come a little bit closer. So
sure. This was a fun one. This was about careers and career viability. So we do see occasional patterns where we have social sciences and philosophy students learning courses that give them tech skills so they can be more viable in the career market. The question is whether or not we happen to see any of the reverse. Do we see pattern of tech students who are taking social sciences so they can kind of get more rounded? Do you see that as something that's happening now more with people as they move into their careers?
I mean, I think so. I would, I'll give two examples of it working in the other direction. So I teach design thinking and human-centered design at George Mason University. And a lot of the students in my classes are in highly technical fields. I have a lot of computer science majors and like cyber majors and straight up hard science majors, and they love this stuff because they get the idea of exploration, the idea of like scientific experimentation, and design thinking forces you to take a more like nonlinear approach to problem solving. And I find that they really take to it because they feel like unleashed, so I'm really enjoying that, and I see these folks, these kinds of students like at George Mason where I teach, being like looking for that because they've heard the mantra that they need to be well-rounded. So I'm kind of excited about that. The other quick example I'll give is these micro pathways that we've been talking about. One of the core design principles for the lab's micro pathways anyway is that we add in you have to get one certification if you get one of these approved micro pathways in a durable skill, and the employers kind of set which one, because it could be like collaboration or critical thinking or empathy, and we have the employers say, okay, what are we going to put in this stack of credentials around cybersecurity or fiber optics or advanced manufacturing. We're going to add in a module on 21st century skills or durable skills, and they get to pick which one it is. And I will say, out of the 130 micro pathways we've created, that critical thinking is the one that that is in the lead in terms of what employers pick most. But empathy is high up there too.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's that's a wonderful way to actually have the curriculum be somewhat bespoke for particular priorities of an employer. When we're building our kind of stackable credentials, we're thinking about how we align different industry certifications that sort of send a signal in the marketplace to each one of the kind of stackable bundles that then kind of lead up to the 4-year degree, and also about that evolution of kind of which durable skills and where. But it's interesting to think about how you might adjust those sort of based on priorities. Do we need more collaboration? Do we need more group work? Or as you said, do we need more kind of critical thinking? Seems to be number one and should be infused, it seems, in almost any course in some way. But Kathleen, this has been absolutely terrific. It's been fantastic to learn more about your insights and the book. And just as a reminder, and I think we have a URL to put in the chat, which we did, but your book, Who Needs College Anymore, is coming out on February the 25th. Congratulations on it, and thank you so much for your kind of long career kind of supporting higher institutions. So thank you for being here today.
Well, Jennifer, thank you to you and Nexford for hosting me, and I'm excited about your model and to see how folks in the U.S. particularly are, come along and learn about it.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. We're excited about that as well. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining.